Welcome everyone to a chat from Paul Grainger today about how to find internships and basically just looking at the job market and landing some placements in industry. So Paul, as a bit of a background, is the leader of learning and development at Professionals Australia. He's spent 8 years helping engineering students find jobs, delivering exceptional results at work and building reputations in their field. And prior to Professionals Australia, Paul was a senior policy advisor to the state and federal members of parliament and has worked under Kevin Rudd as well. So I'll hand over to Paul to talk about some of his experience and to give us a better idea about how to land internships.
Thanks very much, guys. And hello to a few of us on here, and hello to people watching this later as a recording. So the blurb is often a funny thing where you have to do to before an event. Basically, my job is being in charge of helping our 25,000 members at Professionals Australia to win internships and jobs, and also like succeed in those jobs through training. So if at any stage you have a question, if you're watching this later as a recording and you'd like to talk to me about anything to do with job search or careers in engineering, head over to LinkedIn. I accept all connection requests, and I'm happy to speak to members and non-members alike, and give some, free advice about, what your situation is in your job search and internship search. So the first question I probably should answer is who we are. So Professionals Australia is the trade union for Australia's engineers. We're a not-for-profit member-run organisation, so we're run by engineers for engineers. Our mission, like the reason we actually exist, is to turn Australia into a more innovative economy. So if you look at the Australian economy at present, 60% of it is in primary industries, basic services and agriculture, and less than 15% of the Australian economy is in value-added industries like engineering, and particularly less than 7% is in sort of mechanical engineering industry. So what we'd like over the next decade is for that percentage of the economy that is innovative and productive and value-added to double. Okay, we'd like to see it go from 15% to 30%. That would mean that we could join the South Koreas, the Germanys, America, Scandinavian nations in being like highly value-added, highly innovative, high-wage, highly secure economies. So basically, as an organization, we do 3 things every day to try and achieve that. The first is we get our 25,000 members together and we put pressure on every different kind of decision maker you can find, whether they're business leaders or politicians, to try and get them to make future focused decisions. So getting them to invest in research and development, getting them to invest in infrastructure, getting them to invest in future industries. Good example at the moment is trying to get, working with the federal government to try and get them to invest in future industries like electric vehicle manufacturing, electric battery manufacturing, lithium hydroxide refining. Basically, Australia is the Saudi Arabia of lithium. The only country that comes close to us is Bolivia. So there's no reason why we should just get our lithium out the ground and then flog it for the cheapest price overseas and ignore the creation of like tens of thousands of high-wage, highly secure engineering jobs in a refining industry, in a battery manufacturing industry, in a car industry. So that sort of pressure on decision makers to create more engineering jobs in the future, better jobs, more innovative jobs, more actual engineering rather than project management of low engineering sort of projects. The second thing we do is we represent you in the workforce. So when you get through your degree and you get your first job, whichever company that is, there will be a group of Professionals Australia members already working there. What they do is they get together on a regular basis and they discuss the work and how they would like to see the work done in the future. So you probably have a common, basic understanding of trade unions, which is we use our strength in numbers to try and get more money and better conditions, and we negotiate collectively. That is a core part of what we do, but what we do as a white collar union is much broader than that. It's much more about democracy in the workforce, because what we found over the years is the more democratic a company is, the more the engineers have control over the actual engineering and how it's done. Turns out the better for everybody. The more profitable the organization is, the more successful the organization is, and the better their products and results for stakeholders in the community tend to be. The more engineers are in control of engineering rather than accountants and bean counters and HR people. And so we try and put the professionals in charge of the profession in each workplace. And then the third thing we do is what I'm doing today. So providing an individual career support program to all of our members to help you win your first internship, win your first graduate job, and then be successful in that first couple of years at work so you can go after the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth job all the way through to registration and retirement. So I'm going to speak about a few things today. The first thing I'll explain is just what's happening in the job market. You need to understand sort of the competition you face so you can set your expectations about what you're walking into. But also, the key thing to understand is over the last decade, engineering employers have changed the way they try and employ you, find you, but students haven't changed the way they apply for jobs. So the pandemic and the last 10 years, employers have shifted altogether the channels and methods they use to try and find you, but most students around the country are still applying like it's 1999. Okay, so we need you to understand. I'm going to help you understand how employers have changed so you can react to that change so that when you go looking for an internship or a job, you can place yourself exactly where employers are actually looking these days and maximize the chance of a painless and quick job search or internship search. I'll spend most of my time just walking you step by step through the process of applying and how to optimize it. So I realized today the focus is on internships, but I'll sort of speak about internships and graduate jobs within the same process because they are similar with a few tweaks. Not twerks, God, it's been a long pandemic, hasn't it? So I'll talk about how do you find the jobs you're most likely to win so you can focus the limited time you have on the jobs opportunities where you have the best chance of success and put the most detailed work into those rather than applying for everything randomly. I'll talk about how to build strong applications that get you interviews, how to win those interviews, what you should do with LinkedIn so that employers will find you for non-advertised jobs, how to network and get references for jobs from people who already work at the company. And once you're offered a position, what to double check in the contract before you sign it to make sure it's a good deal before you sign it and agree to live by those conditions. So once I've taken you through that process of getting internships and getting jobs, I'll then talk about succeeding at work. It is important. I know you're not quite there and you haven't even graduated uni yet, but it's important to start thinking about how you will make the best possible start to the first 18 months of your career, because that basically involves doing some extra development beyond university. Okay, thinking about industry skills, industry knowledge, leadership skills, basically a lot of interpersonal skills that are very specific to the industry you end up in. And it's critical to sort of do a bit of development in those skill areas before you actually start the graduate job, because every single graduate job in engineering comes with a trial period. The trial period is a cooling off period for the employer of 6 to 18 months where they get to have a look at how you perform, check that your performance lives up to their expectations when they hire you. If it doesn't, they leave themselves the opportunity to release you, nothing you can do about it. So it's a period of 6 to 18 months at the beginning where you have no job security and you essentially haven't got the job yet. You're on trial for the job. So developing those like industry interpersonal skills on top of your degree will allow you to connect theory to practice and be successful and get through to the end of that trial and then sign a permanent secure contract, which is the legitimate start of your career. So I'll talk about some of the things to think about and how we can facilitate that extra training. And also talk a little bit at the end about a longer term career progression. Basically, you need to build towards licensing as an engineer in Australia. It used to be optional. It's progressively becoming compulsory. It's not something you need to worry about now. You're not eligible for licensing as an engineer until you have 5 years experience after university. But the moment you do have 5 years experience, you can't basically continue unless you're licensed in your career. So we're a licensing provider at Professionals Australia. I'll just basically go through the process quickly at the end so that you understand over the next 10 years how to do it seamlessly and get through to registration as seamlessly and as affordably as possible. So just keep in mind as I'm going through the talk, if I talk about something you would like help with, or I talk about a service that we offer that you'd like to use, you can click the link at any time that's in the chat and that will give you a 60% discount on our membership. So our student membership's usually $10 a month. Because we're a not-for-profit, whenever we give a lecture at campus, we offer it for $4 a month instead of 10. That is fully tax deductible. So you get half it back through tax because we're a registered charity. And you also, it's a cancel anytime situation. So it's a month to month, $4. If you find it valuable, you keep it. If you don't find it valuable, you can cancel at any time, no questions asked, by pressing a button on the website. So just keep that in mind, that there's a a discounted membership on offer from this lecture if you want to use any of our services. So the first thing I want to talk about what's happening in the job market, particularly with reference to mechanical engineering. So Queensland University of Technology conducts a survey of all engineering graduates across the country each year to find out how long it takes them to get a full-time job beyond university and how many of them do actually achieve that. So what we're seeing in mechanical engineering does give us, as a professional association, some cause for concern during the pandemic. So we've seen a decline over the years of the pandemic in mechanical engineering and the percentage of people who actually achieve full-time work after university. But what we're seeing is we're now down to a situation where basically halfway through the year after university graduation, 34% of mechanical engineering graduates have still not found full-time work in mechanical engineering. Of the 76% who do, we're also finding that 30% of them have basically found full-time work outside of mechanical engineering. And when we contact those people and ask them why, the common story for them is, well, I haven't found a mechanical engineering job that utilizes my skills, so I'm working in some other random job while I continue to search for a mechanical engineering job. So when you take that into account, what we're seeing in the data is basically half of all mechanical engineering graduates still not having a mechanical engineering job halfway through the year after university. That's a problem for us as a nation because, you know, the first year of graduate training is critical. You know, the learning curve over the first 18 months is probably where you make the biggest leap in your skills and locks in the rest of your career. So we don't want a big chunk of graduates missing the first 6 months of that first year. We need to improve it. Part of this is the pandemic. So part of it is that, you know, supply chains have been disrupted. And, you know, we've seen mechanical engineering job advertisements cut in half for every month of the pandemic compared to prior to the pandemic. And there will be some recovery in that post-pandemic. But these were problems pre-existing the pandemic. Part of the other explanation is that the number of mechanical engineering jobs has grown mildly. So the number of mechanical engineering job opportunities over the last decade has grown by 1.9%, which is pretty much middle of the pack when you compare it to other Australian industries. But the number of mechanical engineers graduating each year from Australian universities who want their first mechanical engineering job has more than doubled over the last decade. And that's part of the issue. It's a supply and demand issue. So why am I telling you all that? I'm giving you the unvarnished reality, which I'm sure many employer associations may not. So that's important. I don't want you to be surprised by this when you actually go to try and find a job or an internship. But the reason I'm telling you mainly is because there's a way around this. The way around this is to change, to be more strategic and be smarter in the way you apply than the average student is at present. Okay. So I said to you before, employers have changed the way they recruit, but students have kept just doing the same method that students have done for, you know, all of human history. So we need to change that. What is that? It's basically understanding that there is more than one job market. So 99% of students are only active in one of two job markets. There's two job markets, but most students are only active in one of them. And they're active in the smaller job market. So most students are only active in what's called the advertised job market, jobs that are advertised on Seek or Jora.com. The only way that students apply for jobs is waiting for them to be advertised. And the only method they use to try and get them is submitting one generic resume after another. The strategy of most students is put together a single resume, then give that resume to every employer as quickly as possible, hoping to improve your odds through the speed and volume of your application, like buying lots of lottery tickets. The problem with that is that employers have moved away from the advertised job market over the last decade, and then even more so during the pandemic. Okay, most 2/3 of all job opportunities are in what's called the hidden job market, completely different job market, not advertised jobs. There's two ways you get hidden or non-advertised jobs. One is through the company finding you. There's been a huge increase during the pandemic of companies hiring recruiters to identify people and contacting applicants rather than applicants applying to the company. So 35% of people actually get hired that way now each year in engineering. And that's overtaken the number of people who get hired as a result of submitting an application, which is only 25%. Okay. The reason that fundamentally is because during the pandemic, there are 15 unemployed people in Australia for every job advertised on Seek, meaning that engineering employers are basically terrified of advertising because they know the moment they advertise, they're going to be flooded with thousands of irrelevant applications who are not even, many of them, not even engineers. When we ask employers how many of the applications you receive are actually relevant to the job, they tell us 2.5% of applications. So basically nobody. So they've gone away from advertising towards identifying you. The way they do that fundamentally now is through LinkedIn. They try and find LinkedIn profiles that match selection criteria for a job they're trying to fill. Then they reach out to you either over the phone or DM you through LinkedIn and invite you to come in and start the process. The other way you get a job that's not advertised is networking. Okay, that's how the majority of people get jobs. 40% of people who get hired each year, they get a reference from somebody who works at the organization, or the organization's existing staff basically suck them in. Okay, they're hiring through networks. That's the most efficient way. When you get a reference, you have a 1 in 7 chance of winning the job. When they find you through LinkedIn, you have a 1 in 68 chance. But what are most students doing? What are 99.9% of students doing? Using the least efficient resume as their only tactic for getting an internship or a job. Every time you submit 1 in 173 chance it's successful, and only 25. So I'm going to go through the process now, but what I want you to keep in mind is you can ignore some of those bad mechanical job outcome statistics if you're a smarter applicant, which is basically putting more time into the hidden job market than the average student does. Not 100% of your time, but even if you put 25% of your job search efforts into networking and building your profile, rather than the average student putting about 5% of their time into those things, then you're going to drastically improve the number of opportunities you have access to and know about, and you're going to reduce your competition because most students aren't doing that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about before we can start applying for jobs is that you need a job search plan. A job search plan is just the answer to the question, what job do you specifically want? What job are you specifically targeting? Okay. Now, most people don't have a plan because most people, like I said, use the machine gun approach. And same as what I did when I left university, or your professors when they left university, everybody does the same thing. Machine gun approach with a generic resume, apply for everything as quickly as possible. The problem with that is that employers in engineering are doing everything they can to filter out generic applicants. They want a lot more than just a uni degree and a few extracurricular activities. They want to, like, people who specifically want to do their tasks, who have the right personality for their environment, who want to stay at their company long term. They want a lot more detail, and students are overwhelming them, just giving them the same generic application. Okay, that's why they say that only 2.5% of applicants are relevant to them or worth consideration. So what turns out to be the reality is most students go wide and generic. The students who have a quick and effective job search are actually do the opposite. They go narrow and targeted. The less jobs you apply for in a more detailed way, the faster you get a job and the more opportunities you'll have. So we need a plan. The good news is it's not complicated. I shouldn't almost call it a plan. It's just like, before you go and apply for everything, you first need 5 minutes of self-awareness. So you need to answer 3 questions. What are you good at? What are you interested in? What's your personality? What are you good at? So far, where do you get your better results and feel most confident in all of your subjects, in all of your student clubs, in all of your voluntary activities, in all of your uni jobs in hospital and retail? People tend to break into one of 2 categories. Either you're good technically, but you're better with people. You thrive when you're leading, managing, communicating. Or you go the other way. You're okay with people, but you thrive in a technical niche or a specific area of skill and knowledge. Okay. Now, basically, very few people do both at a high level. Okay. I deal with people all the way through to senior management and retirement, and even engineering executives. Very few do both at a high level. People that generally are specialists or managers. Okay. So think about how you break down into those 2 categories, and what sort of parts of mechanical engineering, out of all the different mechanical engineering industries and job options, where are your results more focused? Okay. The second question is, what are you most interested in? What led you to study this degree? What subjects have you enjoyed more than others? What topics do you naturally read about because you're interested? within mechanical engineering. Okay. You should pursue that interest in your applications. And that sounds obvious, but I can tell you not one student does. Okay. Every student does the complete opposite of trying to figure out what is the safest choice. Okay. So they look at all the different mechanical options and they try and find the one that's going to grow the most over the next 10 years. And they apply for that irrespective of whether they're interested or suited to do that or good at it, because they think that's the safer bet to apply for the companies that are going to do better. So applying for maybe advanced manufacturing organizations at the moment more than applying to be a mechanical engineer in black coal mining industry. Okay, because you think it's more sustainable, safer choice. The problem is you're trying to get a job and companies don't hire you based on how the company is going to go over the next 10 years. What they're looking for, what HR people like myself have drummed into us, is to only hire people who are intrinsically or internally motivated, who actually want to be at this company more than they want any kind of job, who actually want to do our day-to-day tasks and projects. Because we know if that internal motivation exists, we know you will work harder, be more proactive, learn faster. If things go wrong, you'll bounce back and be resilient because you want to be here and do this. So we're looking for that. And then students are giving us, well, I've applied, in an interview, I can guarantee if I ask a student, why are you here at the beginning of the interview? Why have you applied for this job? They'll start telling me all the things that are good about the company. Okay. Because it's a safe job. And I'm like, okay, but like what I'm actually looking for is you want to be here because you really just want to do these tasks. And so pursuing that motivate your interests. I'm not saying pursuing your passion. There's no job where you'll be dancing through the hallway singing, Kumbaya, because it's just but pursuing your interests is a better idea than trying to figure out what is the safest bet. Okay. And the third question is, what's your personality? Do you do better in small teams where relationships are important? Or do you do better under top-down authority and clear direction? That will tell you whether you should work for a small, medium, or large-sized organization. So once we have the answers to the three questions of what are you good at, what are you interested in, and what's your personality, we find no more than 6 jobs in the one area of mechanical engineering that best match the answers. And we apply for internships and jobs there in a hyper-detailed way. So you're setting yourself up for success. You'll have a quick job search because you're applying to the companies who want to say yes to you already, because you can give them concrete, provable reasons why you're a better applicant. You're not just saying, I have the same degree as 6,000 other people, please randomly select me. Okay. And then when you actually get the job, you're likely to be good at it over the first couple of years. Okay. Rather than accepting a random job and then finding, hang on, I'm not really good at this. And now the problem is at a graduate level, which is much more expensive than a job search level as a student. Okay. So once we know what we're targeting, then tactically improving our applications is a lot easier. Okay. So once you start applying, you should fix your LinkedIn profile these days before you fix your resume. It's more important in the modern job market. More people get hired by being found than applying. Okay. So your LinkedIn profile needs to be found by recruiters who are out there every day. I know most people don't realize this, but we're trolling LinkedIn really hard to try and find potential interns and graduates, because it's about reducing the cost of our recruitment programs. If we can find you, give you a free internship where we don't pay you, have a free look at you, decide that you're good, and then headhunt you, we've basically canceled the need for a year to do that graduate job ad, which costs $30,000, or spend 3 months interviewing people at a graduate level. Okay, so we're out there using a premium, expensive version of LinkedIn. We're typing in selection criteria for internships and jobs we're trying to fill. And LinkedIn Premium LinkedIn Recruiter gives us a list of profiles that potentially match. And we go through and try and find people to reach out to. The problem is most students won't show up in those search results for a very basic reason. Most people think of LinkedIn as a chore. I'm an old man, but you guys probably like social media, except you don't think LinkedIn is social media. You think LinkedIn is like an annoyance that you have to put up with. So most people just have a static biography on LinkedIn of who, what, where, why, and how I live. Okay. But recruiters aren't interested in where you live, what you've done, who you are, what you're interested. They're interested in filling a job. So one of the first service we provide to people after they join is we sit down one-on-one and figure out what they should apply for. The second is we help them rewrite their LinkedIn profile from top to bottom to make it about the job they want rather than who they are. The moment you make it about the job you want and how you match that job, like clockwork, recruiters start showing up because you've got the right keywords, because you're speaking to their selection criteria in your summary, in your work experience statements. You're just turning it into a job search tool rather than a basic biography. Okay. Once you do that, recruiters show up. The good news is that LinkedIn tells you, so you can't look at somebody's LinkedIn profile without them knowing about it. So we know when recruiters, and we can keep making adjustments until we get enough recruiters consistently looking. Then we need to impress them. They're going to look at the content. They're not just going to take you at face value. If you say, I'm amazing at this, they're not just going to believe you at face value. For them to believe that you have those things that you've said, what we need to show them is results you've achieved quantified in numbers. Okay. So the ability to produce small results and achievements tells them, well, this person can connect theory to practice, plus they look like they're focused on my area and my company and my job. So let me get them in for a conversation at least. Okay. So the big problem here is not the absence of results. The big problem is every student has told me the same thing for 10 years when I tell them we need to get results onto your resume and LinkedIn, which is, Paul, I don't have any. You know, I have massive imposter syndrome as a student. I'm just a little student with very little experience, and I don't have any results and can't do it. The good news is that's always wrong. Okay. Even my senior members tell me for different reasons, like engineers, for some reason, once you become a senior engineer, you'll have false humility rather than imposter syndrome. As engineers, unlike other categories of people, don't want to spruik themselves for whatever reason. But the good news is you're all much more accomplished than you realize. I'm not suggesting you have to go do anything else. You already have done you've all already done achieved about 20 results in your life that would help you get a job if you listed them on LinkedIn that you're not using because you don't realize their achievements. Okay. So you probably think that employers like me are obsessed with academic results and work experience, and that's it. All right. I'm not that interested in those two categories. Okay. Because you're all the same in those two categories. No matter how well you do at uni, you're all novices knowledge-wise at the beginning, and you all have very little experience at the end of university. Some of you have a couple of months, some of you have a year, but nobody has much more. Okay. So I can't actually say one of you is better than the others in that category. So that's not really helpful for recruiting at a graduate level. What I'm obsessed with, where you are all wildly different, is interpersonal skills, people skills, and attitude. Okay. So that's what I'm actually searching for results in. Soft skills, interpersonal skills like communication, leadership, teamwork, project management, risk assessment, conflict resolution, and attitudes like you really want this job more than employment. You're coachable. If I give you constructive criticism, you'll respond and develop rather than going to pieces. Once you realize recruiters are searching for your interpersonal skills and attitudes, a light bulb should go off. I don't have 55 years of engineering work experience, but I have uni jobs in hospo and retail. I have student clubs, I have voluntary activities, I have sports clubs, I have group projects. All of those are perfectly fine for quantifying my results in soft skills and attitudes. So I can take control of the process. I don't just have to have a generic application. I can start giving employers concrete reasons why I'm better than everybody else. All right. To give you some examples, because people will still tell me like, yeah, cool story, Paul, but like, yeah, I really don't have results. So employers are looking for tiny things. I very specifically call them results and not achievements. If I say to you, what are your achievements? You think of like, did I design the Tesla battery while I was in second year? Or, have I commissioned, am I the senior engineer while at university and on the Westgate Tunnel project? No. Results, results are not awards and achievements. Results are, have you interacted for the last 20, 25 years with other people? Yes. If so, you have results of that behavior. Okay. I just need to know what they are. So, I would take people through, instead of asking them what their results are, I'd just say like, here's some things employers are looking for. Have you ever done anything for the first time? Yes. Have you ever led anything? Yes. Have you ever promoted anything? Yep. Have you ever explained engineering information to a non-engineer? Every day. Have you ever resolved a conflict between two other people? Sure. So those are the sort of things employers are looking for, to see that you can actually put, textbook knowledge into practice in a workplace. You've all done all of those things. It's just a matter of saying, what was the result of that behavior? When you resolved that conflict, what happened? Well, we finished on time rather than finishing late because it was a group project and two people were stopping us from finishing on time. Once I resolved the conflict, we finished on time. quantifiable results. Okay. So once we get those results, recruiters start contacting you through DM on LinkedIn. They basically offer you to come in a week's time for an interview, and that's the beginning of the job conversation. Once you've done that, you've more than doubled your chances compared to the resume. Okay. So step one is LinkedIn. Step two is the good old resume, because 35 to 40% of jobs will still be advertised. What you need to do with your resume for internships and jobs is make it much better at getting interviews. So the average engineering student's resume is pretty atrocious at getting interviews. The average at the moment for engineering students around the country is 15 submissions to get one job interview. The average student has to do 5 job or internship interviews before they win an opportunity for the first time. So if you do the maths, 5 times 15, 75 is the average number of applications to get a job or an internship for an engineering student around the country. That's way too much work. The average time that takes is 7.5 months. Okay, so our members win a job interview from every 3rd application on average, and they win one of their first 2 job interviews. So they only have to put in 6 applications on average to get a job or an internship. And it only takes them less than 2 months instead of 7.5 months. So what we've taught them to make their applications more efficient is that it's not 1983, and literally nobody will ever read this application. Okay, the internet took over job search and recruitment in the mid-90s. For the last 30 years, the problem of employers is not reading your application and deciding who's best. Their problem is they're drowning in applicants. They get way too many applicants, and their big problem is, how do we cut down this deluge to a manageable shortlist that we actually consider really quickly? So all that happens when you submit an engineering resume these days is it gets scanned through a piece of software called an applicant tracking system. It gets matched against the selection criteria for one job. If it's a great match, if it's a 90% plus match, you maybe make it through to the short list of 6 people. If it's less than a 90% match with that one particular job, it just gets deleted by robots, and no human ever knows you applied or existed. Okay. So the golden rule here is that every resume, if you want it to actually lead to an interview, has to be constructed for one job and one job only. If you don't get that job and you apply for another job, you have to start the resume again from a blank piece of paper from scratch. Now, nobody wants to hear that. It sounds painful in theory, but the reality is, by having a little bit of patience at the beginning and putting in higher quality, more detailed applications, you only do it 6 times over 2 months rather than 75 times over 7.5 months if you try and go quickly. So slow is smooth and smooth is fast with resumes. If you get through to that shortlist, what happens is they still don't read your application. Just a human like myself eye scans it for key achievements, and then we go to your LinkedIn profile looking for evidence to back up what you've said about yourself on paper. Okay, if we can find consistent behavior and information on your LinkedIn profile, we assume your resume is a true story of who you are, and we give you a job interview. If we find nothing on LinkedIn, or we find inconsistent information, then we don't give you a job interview. That's the end of the application process for you. We assume your resume is a nice story you've made up for this application, not who you are. Okay. So to give you one really, key example at the moment, a lot of people on LinkedIn gave people a while ago the option to put a green circle around their profile picture on LinkedIn to say, I'm desperately in search of anything. That's a bad idea, because you'll be putting an application saying, I'm specifically interested and suited for your job, employer. And then before they give you an interview, they will go to LinkedIn. If they've got the green circle, done. Bye-bye, because this application, which is a lie, which one's true and which one's a lie, I can't be bothered. I don't have the time as a recruiter to figure it out. Okay. So you've got to be consistent. And that's the other reason we start with LinkedIn first, because it's necessary to back up a resume to get job interviews these days. Resume on its own these days doesn't lead to job interview unless it's backed up online. The third way you can get jobs and internships is networking. It's the most likely way. It's the quickest way. Once you get a reference from somebody who works there, you have a 1 in 7 chance. So it's the best way to get a job. The only problem is students don't do networking pretty much at all. The only networking students do is career fairs and cocktail parties. We have the glorious chance to walk up to strangers and say, hey, stranger, you don't know me, the difference between me and a bar of soap, but could I have a job or an internship? No. Okay, I'm going to go do this 40 more times around the career fair, and then I'll go home demoralized. But the good news is that's not networking. Okay, when I'm talking about networking, I'm basically talking about the process of using LinkedIn to reach out to people who currently do the job you want to do. Okay, not waiting for events, not going to cocktail parties, Because everybody knows those cocktail parties are not legit. You know, the notion you're going to rock up to a buffet and say like, hey, I'm a mechanical engineer, and oh, I'm a mechanical engineering employer, here's a job. You know, everybody knows that's not legit. So networking is, you can start right now. You could go right now to LinkedIn, type in any mechanical engineering company you'd like to work for. LinkedIn gives you a free list of people who work there. You go through those list of profiles, you find the person who most does what you want to do in the future. And then for free, you DM them through LinkedIn and start interacting with them. Now, people will tell me, Paul, that DM to a stranger is super awkward. It's not. If you DM people and say, hey, I'm a student at Melbourne University, I was researching top pros, came across your profile. Do you think there's any chance we could speak for 20 minutes max over Zoom at any time that suits you? Promise I won't ask you to give me anything, job or an internship. I just want to ask you questions about this project I can see you worked on last year and learn more about it, because what you're doing is the direction I'd love to take my longer term career. If you reach out to people that way and guarantee you won't waste more than 20 minutes of time, you won't ask them to give you anything, you just want to ask them questions and learn, 80% of the time they say yes. Okay. They have no problem with that. They need to network for their own career and mentor people. And you've guaranteed I will be a painless mentee. Okay. So suddenly you have an unlimited capacity to quickly, for free, reach out to hyper relevant people who, if you build a relationship with them, can turn into jobs. Okay. So why wouldn't you do it? The final reason people say to me, I still don't want to do it, Paul, is because like, I don't know when to actually, or how to, or when to actually directly try and leverage it and ask them to help me. My advice is just don't try and figure that out. Never ask them. The way you leverage networking, the moment you try and leverage networking is the moment they ghost you and it gets awkward. Okay. So never leverage it. Just set up conversations, keep it relaxed by just asking them questions about the job and learning from them. Don't ask them for the opportunity. And then a couple of weeks later, after you've had a conversation, their company will advertise a job on Seek. You apply for it. In the cover letter, you say, dear employer, the only reason I've applied is I was fortunate to have a conversation with one of your staff. Let's call her Sally. Sally, a couple of weeks ago, described the company and it sounds like a great place to work. But we also, from our discussion, I've identified 6 concrete reasons why I'm a better applicant than everybody else. And that's the only reason I've applied. I'd like to have a job interview where we could discuss these 6 concrete bullet points and see if you agree. If you put that application into me as a recruiter, as a head of hiring, I get goosebumps. 100% of the time you get a job interview because I'm drowning in generic applicants. And you just said, I have that much more patience and self-awareness. I've found one of your trusted staff and work with them. And the only reason I've applied is because I've got real concrete provable reasons why I'm a good applicant. Okay. So you always get the job interview, but the key here is before the job interview, I'll go off to Sally and say, Sally, this applicant's saying that you're the basis of their application. Is that true? And then she gives you the reference without you ever asking her for it awkwardly. She says, yeah, we had a 20-minute Zoom chat like a month ago. It was really good. They were easy to understand and get along with. They were just asking me questions about the project I worked on last year. They didn't ask me to give them a job or anything or help them. I really enjoyed it. They've been proactive and staying in touch with me ever since. Okay. Recruiter is just standing there saying, tick, 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 tick. All the things I care about hiring at an entry level. Clear communicator, gets on with my existing staff, organized, proactive, learning attitude, genuinely wants to be here, genuinely wants to do our tasks. My reaction to that, the reason that reference is so powerful is because my reaction to that is basically shut up and take my money, they're hired. Okay. Once all those things have been confirmed by one of my staff who I trust. Okay. So hopefully what I've just shown you is networking is actually the best way to get a job, and it shouldn't be the last thing you do like most students. It should be the first thing you do. The second thing you should do is build up your profile so that people like me can find you and offer you jobs. And then the third thing you should do is make your resume more efficient at getting interviews. Okay. Most people do it exactly the wrong way around. They do the opposite of that. But if you follow that formula, your internship and job search will be a lot faster and a lot better. And you're able to target jobs you can actually succeed in rather than randomly having to accept whatever is first offered to you after applying hundreds of times. Okay. So once you win a job, you get offered interviews. Winning interviews is about having the Q&A sorted out before you go there. 100% entirely possible. They all use the same questions and same techniques. No job interview is random. So what we do for our members is 2 things. We offer a one-on-one interview prep session. As soon as you know you've got an internship or a job interview, you contact us straight away. We have a Zoom session with you, predict the questions, prepare your answers, so that when you go do the job interview, you know exactly what's going to happen. You're not surprised. And the key is then you can focus on your performance, listening and communicating, rather than sitting there half listening in the interview and half thinking what's coming next, okay, or what you just said. The other thing we do is we offer full unlimited practice interviews. Okay. And that's the key thing, because at an entry level, you've all got the same qualifications, knowledge, experience, skills. It's hard to separate yourself at interview at an entry level. Okay. So the person who separates themselves at an entry level is basically based on the clarity and confidence of their actual performance, not what they say. Okay. The problem is, in human history, the first 3 or 4 times humans do job interviews, they're not clear or confident, they're a gigantic mess. So it's better that the gigantic mess is done with us in a practice before the job is on the line, where it doesn't matter, so that when you actually go do the job interview, where it matters, it's the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th time you've done it, rather than the first time you're attempting to do it live and just get it right the first time. Okay. So the combination of that preparation leads our members to win one of their first 2 internship or job interviews, whereas students around the country are averaging 5. So basically most students are wasting 3 or 4 real extra jobs by practicing in the real interviews, which is just a horribly bad idea. Once you're offered an opportunity, internship or job, you'll be presented with a contract you have to sign. Just remember one thing for the rest of your life, if you can: do not sign them on the spot. That is a catastrophe, and engineering employers don't expect you to. Every engineering employer, when they offer you a contract, will say the same thing, which is, here's the contract, congratulations. Please take it home for a few days, go through the details, come back by the end of the week with a yes or no. Okay, take it home. Always take them up on that offer. It decides what you're paid, what you do, who you know, how you're trained, whether you get promotions, whether you get pay rises, how long the trial period where you have no job security is, whether you're allowed to leave if you've got a better offer, or you're locked in by a restraint of trade clause in the fine print, who owns your intellectual property in the future. You have to check those things and understand them before you agree to it, at the very least. If you're a member of us, you just give it to our lawyers. As soon as you get the contract, you upload it to our lawyers on our website. Relax, our lawyers will decide for you. They'll come back to you within a couple of hours and tell you either go for gold, it's a good deal, or they'll explain to you what needs to change, and we'll help you go back and renegotiate small things. Now, not big things at a graduate level or an undergraduate level. I'm not saying, an employer offers you a $70,000 a year job and you say 140, take it or leave it. That's my final offer. But tiny little improvements. So let me give you one example. You probably care most about the salary. The average graduate salary for a mechanical engineer in Victoria in first year is currently $74,000. That's what employers expect to pay you. They don't want to underpay you against the average, because underpaying you in your first job is just basically, they might as well call up their competitive companies and say, hey, just letting you know, I'm about to invest a huge chunk of cash in developing this person for the next 18 months. Once I've done that, come and poach them for free. Okay, with the extra money I should have been paying them to put them on an average salary. So employers expect to pay you the average, but in business, nobody offers you their best offer first. I have to assume half of you will come back and haggle. I have to leave room for that to happen so that I can haggle with you. So if I'm expecting to pay you 74, the first offer I would make to you in a contract is 64. Leaving $10,000 room in case you come back to negotiate with you to improve it and still end up where I wanted to end up. Okay. The problem if you sign it on the spot is you're just literally throwing away 10% of your starting salary for no reason at all. If you'd just gone back and asked politely, I've done a bit of research, I found out the average for this job is a little bit higher. Is there any flexibility? They would have said, sure, we can improve it a little bit, based on a bit of negotiation. So every time in your life somebody offers you a salary, that is the first offer, and it should always be improved by 5 to 10%. Okay. You need to check the trial periods more like 6 months rather than 18 months or longer, so you don't have a long period during a global recession of complete job insecurity. Need to check you don't have a long notice period that locks you into the job, because other companies will offer you better jobs, halfway through the contract, and you'll want to take them. The best one is to check what you're actually expected to do day to day. Because if you look at your day-to-day job description in the contract and you're comfortable with it, it's a dead-end job. If you look at it and you go like, looks tough, I can probably do it, but it looks tough. That's a good job that's leading to promotions, because you only get promotions in engineering by developing new skills and taking on management responsibilities. But you only develop new skills if you challenge day to day. So here is the easiest negotiation to do in the world. Going back to an employer and saying, I'd like to develop faster so I could deliver more value to you as the employer. Could I please do 1 or 2 extra responsibilities for the same salary? I'll let you on a big secret. If you offer to do more work to an owner for the same amount of money, we're going to say yes. It's not a problem. In fact, the only problem would be I give you too much more work. Okay, you're keen to be, buried in work. Let's go. So once we've checked all of these things and it's actually a good deal, we green light you to sign it. You start the internship, and then you need to make the most of the internship. Internships are not all created equal. Mentors in internships are not all created equal. Some of them have more headspace to actually think about how to maximize the internship for you. Some of them are massively overworked and stressed out and just do the bare minimum while you're sort of hanging around as a bit of an annoyance in the background. Okay, so the first thing I would say is on day one, make your intention to make the most of it and be as challenged as possible on the internship clear to the person who's in charge of your experience. Because that might like shake them out of like what they're stressing about in their job and say like, okay, I've really got to make sure they make the most of this. I got to throw projects at them or throw some responsibilities at them. They'll never give you anything critically important, but they might actually give you a better experience if you say, I really want to learn as much as possible and be challenged as much as possible. Please throw as much as possible at me. Okay. The second thing to make the most of the internship is realizing that it's fundamentally a test to see if you can work in their environment and with their people. So the social aspect, showing that you can do the social aspect amongst their staff is just as important as anything you do technically during the internship. So if people go to lunch, don't go like, oh, I've got to do this task, go to lunch. People go to dinner, go to dinner. If there's any opportunity to like socially interact with people, embrace that 100%. Okay. And then the third thing, simple thing to make the most of any internship is to, when you come home each day from an internship, spend 10 minutes writing in a journal what you did that day in bullet points and anything you learned and anything you achieved. So that will help you reflect and then like maybe say like where you need to be more challenged while the internship's still going. But critically, when you try to use that internship to get yourself a graduate job down the track, you'll actually remember what happened in detail. And it will make the process of constructing resumes and LinkedIn profiles based on that experience 1,000 times easier. Because if you don't do that, all you'll remember like 2 years later when you're at the end of your studies is like the vaguest details. And then you've made the internship a little bit redundant in terms of graduate job search and helping you. So once you start, if you sign a contract and start a graduate job, the thing to just remember is that it's not a moment to relax, because 20% of engineering job graduates fail at that first job within the first 18 months. So the problem here is that everybody applies randomly. They accept the first random job without ever thinking, am I suited or good at it or interested? They find out the answer is no once they start doing it. Then they find out mechanical engineering employers basically don't offer training in the workforce anymore. I don't have time now to explain really why, so let me just give you the data. 10 years ago, employers did more than 12 days of formal in-industry training per year for their staff. Mechanical engineering employers in the latest survey this year are down to 1 day of formal training being the average per year. So they basically fully outsourced responsibility. Part of it is it's all contract project-based work. They have 9 months worth of work. They don't want long-term staff. They want short-term contract staff, and they don't do a lot of training as a result. It's a big part of it. But what we did a couple of years ago was realize people need training because 20% of people are failing at the job. So we created our own graduate program. So if you become a member of PA, one of the big benefits is you get access to our graduate program, which is hundreds of on-demand online courses, a course platform in industry skills and knowledge to everything you need to learn beyond university to actually be good at the job, get through the trial period, and then go after the second, third, fourth, fifth job. You get digital credentials and badges for everything and certificates for everything you do in our graduate program. So it gives you credit. The rest of your industry can see you're constantly upskilling. And the real big clincher is that everything you do in our graduate program to be good at the job is automatically certified and makes you eligible for registration when that becomes a thing. So we're a registration provider at Professionals Australia. We have the RPN's registration scheme. All you need to know at this stage, you don't need to worry about at this stage. It will be compulsory by the time you guys are eligible, which is 5 years after university, 5 years of work experience after university. It's already compulsory in Victoria, but it'll be compulsory all around the country. So it's something you will have to do. Something you have to build towards because you have to do enough training in the workforce to actually build up your eligibility. All you need to know with us is if you join us as a student for $4 a month, we give you unlimited one-on-one help to get a job. Once we help you win that job, we put you into our graduate program to be good at the job. and you're automatically doing everything you need to do there to build up towards eligibility. So the moment you have 5 years experience, you're automatically eligible. You can be assessed straight away, get the license, and move on with your career seamlessly. The other big thing to know about us is that there are multiple providers. I don't need to beat around the bush. You know who the other ones are. But the big difference with us is we're a genuine not-for-profit organization. So we've swallowed the costs. So there's no extra costs with us. If you're a member, registration and the whole process is free with Professionals Australia. With every other provider, it's multiple thousands of dollars a year on top of whatever membership you have with them. And that's basically because we don't want to make profits. We want everybody to be registered, because the fact that only about 20% of qualified engineers in this country are actually licensed is diminishing our profession in the eyes of the public. You just have to look at any project or any organization. There is very few of them that happen on budget, to quality, on schedule, particularly around infrastructure, but also more broadly across the economy. We need a licensing scheme to lift the standards. We need everybody licensed to lift the standards and make sure that only people who are putting in professional development and actually qualified engineers are actually overseeing engineering work in this country. So having said all of that, keen to take a few questions. I'm happy if you watch this later as a recording. As I said before, just hit me up on LinkedIn with any questions. If you watch this later as a recording. But just to wrap up, it's usually $10 a month to join us. If you click the link in the chat from this lecture, you get it for $4 a month. You get unlimited one-on-one expert help from somebody like me to win internships, then win a job, then be good at those jobs, then become licensed. Okay. And then after that, hopefully you'll give back to our younger members, because you'll be mid-career and a highly successful licensed engineer, and then you'll become the mentor through us to our younger members. But thanks for listening. I hope you found that useful. Thanks, guys, for having me in. And yeah, any questions? Happy to quickly answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul, for that.
No worries.
Chat. Yeah, I think we'll open it up to the floor if anyone has any questions. I might start things off.
Yeah.
In terms of, and you're talking about it a lot, but with like your internship, if you ever feel like kind of lost with the work you're doing, which can be quite a common thing for students who like are going into their first placement, or something like that, what's your like strategy for kind of finding your worth and value within the company again, if at any point in time you might kind of be lost a bit with the work you're doing, given you may not have done it before, or that you're kind of getting put to the back just because you're a student?
Yeah. So speak up, because they're expecting you to. They're not expecting, like I find a lot of students or undergraduate employees keeping a lot of their dramas and problems to themselves, and nobody would know, because they think like, oh, well, I don't want to be a nuisance and be constantly asking for help. But, you know, the overwhelming majority of people are happy to help you. So like the best thing is just to vocalize it. If you're uncertain about anything or having problems with anything, vocalize it as quickly as possible. The way you vocalize it in a way that makes it a bit easier is not to just ask people for their opinions rather than asking people to just tell you what to do, if that makes sense. So like, instead of just going like, I'm struggling, can you tell me what to do? If you're struggling, think about what are your options, some of your options to stop struggling, and then go to people and say like, well, I've thought about this option, I've thought about that option, what do you think? So if you ask people for their opinions, they find that less annoying often than just being like saying, just tell me what to do and hold my hand. And but like, yeah, you should just vocalize it. If you become a PA member at any time, the best thing to do is like, before you vocalize it to colleagues, just call us, because there's a whole career team sitting around 24 hours a day ready to have one-on-one conversations with you about what you should do before, and then we can advise you, and then you can go speak to a colleague. But maybe we'll be able to like find a solution or help you without you having to vocalize to colleagues that you are struggling, which, you know, would be the ideal situation if we can fix it and nobody ever knows, and all they see of you is just cruising along, performing well and being comfortable. Yeah, but definitely don't keep it to yourself. Because it will just build and build and build to a crisis, and then it actually leads to, you know, failing at an opportunity if it's kept to itself, if you keep it to yourself. And also we include, I really don't want to trivialize this, we have mental health services included, like the pandemic. If you're struggling, please don't think that's unique. I would say about half of all people in the industry are having some form of mental health related struggle, in my experience. Obviously varying degrees, but we have professional qualified staff that can actually provide mental health counselling services. So even if you're not a member, if you're having those sort of issues, please contact us, and I'm happy to sort of refer you to free services to help you with that.
Thank you very much for sharing that as well. Particularly a lot of students as well being locked up for.
It's been a horrible time, an isolated time, and like the reason to feel more positive if you are struggling is everybody's also struggling. People don't go around telling each other, so they'd probably be healthier if we did.
No, I completely agree with that. Did anyone else have any questions? Otherwise,
just while you're thinking of any final questions, I'll just say for any international student on here or listening later, obviously I don't need to tell you have a few extra challenges in getting a job, but we're super experienced with those challenges. About half of our student members are international students. So you're 1,000% welcome at PA. And included in that $4 a month membership is also skilled visa assistance. So we have migration agents that will sit down with you, help you find the best visa, help you apply for it, legally represent you, and write you a reference that you can give to employers saying they believe you will get that visa and be on a pathway to permanent residency. And if you do that before applying for a job, so if when you're applying for a job, you can explain to employers that you have a credible path to get a visa and then permanent residency, it makes it much more likely that you actually get considered. So what happens with migrants? You don't so much get explicitly rejected by engineering employers, but engineering employers, like I've said, have way too many applications. They need to get down to a short list. The first and easiest way, unfortunately, to cut down the number of applications is to ignore all non-permanent residents without thinking about you. So until you actually say like, hey, don't think of me as a non-permanent resident, think of me as somebody who's 99.9% likely to get that visa and then become a permanent resident, that maximizes your consideration. And once you're being considered, you're super competitive. Often international students have more work experience overseas. But you got to get considered first. So the visa comes before the job, not the other way around. And we can help with that in the student membership. So any final questions, guys? If not, thank you very much for having me again. And please do hit me up on social media for any questions, or if you'd like to have a private discussion, you don't want to ask your question in front of everybody else, happy to do that too. Just head over to LinkedIn and send me a connection request.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah.
Have a great day. And
you too. Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us.